Module 4.5, we are deep into the Andrew Jackson administration today. Today we're going to take a look at, does Andrew Jackson's legacy merit commemoration of the $20 bill? All right, some background. Excuse me. Some background information for you. Andrew Jackson's the guy that's on the $20 bill. There is a controversy right now, and a lot of people have been arguing that he should be replaced by Harriet Tubman. And, excuse me, it looks like it's going to happen. The Treasury said by 2020, Harriet Tubman's going to be released on the $20 bill, and Andrew Jackson's going to come off. So the question is that the right call? You know, should Andrew Jackson be on the $20 bill, or shouldn't he? Harriet Tubman, of course, is the great conductor of the Underground Railroad, and she helped bring a lot of slaves to freedom. A lot of people think that's a more fitting legacy than Andrew Jackson. So that's what we're going to look at today. That's your focus question. To what extent does Jackson deserve to be on the $20 bill? And you have a whole bunch of terms from Chapter 13 to identify. I'll put the page numbers for you in the email when I send this out. So let's dig right in. Jackson, to understand Jackson, we got to remember who this man is. Frontiersman. Okay? He is wealthy, but he's not from that same like Eastern elite that a lot of the other wealthy people are going to have. He's going to be seen as this great fighter for the common man. He's going to be elected by the common people after the vote is expanded to include all white men, not only just white men who own property. So Jackson's got that gravitas coming in. Jackson also has something else going for him too, and that's the fact that he was a general. He was a general in the War of 1812. He won the Battle of New Orleans. Of course, that was after the treaty was signed, but they didn't know the treaty was signed. The war had ended by the time they won the battle. So he was the great hero of the Battle of New Orleans. He was also the one that almost got us to war with Spain. And we had the issue with Spain, so we had to keep all that in mind going in with Jackson. All right. So even though the political parties had kind of converged on the one political party, the Democrats, by this time, Andrew Jackson reformed the political party, the Democratic Republicans, into the Democrats. So now they're just the plain old Democrats, and they're the Jackson Democrats. But there still exist these differences within the country. It's just those differences had not been defined by another political party yet. So a massive tariff is going to be passed in 1828, and this is going to be a very big protective tariff, okay? It was passed in 1828, and it was pushed for by the Adams administration, and Jackson supported it publicly, but he hoped that it would fail. This was a big protective tariff. We have to remember what a protective tariff does. A protective tariff is a tax on trade. So you're taxing imports coming into the country from overseas so that your goods are going to be cheaper. The net effect is that people are paying more for stuff. Okay, but the goal is that you're going to buy more American stuff and less stuff made in Britain, France, or Germany. So the tariff is going to be passed in 1828, and the South is going to see this as a blatant attack on Southern way of life. Because not only do they have to pay more for those goods that they like to buy from Europe, like French wine, as Southern aristocrats love to buy French wine, but that means that other countries are also going to pass tariffs of their own, making our goods more expensive there. So the Southern economy by this time is almost entirely dependent upon cotton production. And this tariff is going to cause the price of their cotton to rise, and it's going to cause the price of manufactured goods to go up. And if prices go up, people don't want to buy as much, which means demand falls, and the South is going to be losing money all around. Excuse me. So the South really sees this tariff. The South really sees this tariff as just something that really just attacks their entire way of life. It's something that is bad for them. And they nickname it the Tariff of Abominations. Okay, they say this tariff is so horrible, it's abominable, it's something that we can't even speak of. It is attacking our way of life, and this is basically a call to arms. And they really see themselves as under attack. They see it as an attack on cotton production, they see it as an attack on the southern economy, and they see it as a northern encroachment on the one thing that the South was not about to let the Northerners take away from them, and that was slavery, because the entire southern economy is dependent on slavery. So South Carolina, and if we take a look at this map of slave distribution around the country, where the deeper red, the more slaves you have, we can see that South Carolina had the highest concentration of slavery in America at that time. You have a bunch of slaves in Virginia, there's some in North Carolina, then we got like deep Mississippi over here where there's a lot, but definitely South Carolina had the most slaves at that time. So when the Tariff of Abominations came, South Carolina especially took this to heart. South Carolina saw the tariff as an attack on Southern way of life and saw that this was an attack on the institution of slavery and that they were coming after everything that the South held dear. Now, they weren't not about to take that. So let me introduce you to another guy, and this guy is going to be another hugely important politician early on, almost as important as Henry Clay. Okay, so we have to remember Henry Clay is this politician that's going to be advancing policies for a long time, runs for president a whole bunch of times, and never wins. John C. Calhoun is another guy like that. Calhoun is a Southern politician. He comes from South Carolina, and he is the staunchest defender for what he sees as the Southern way of life. To make things even more difficult, you know how presidents, when they run for office, they like to bring on as vice presidential candidates somebody that's going to help appeal to other states. Jackson was a Westerner, so he wanted a Southerner on the ticket. So John C. Calhoun was Andrew Jackson's vice president. And John C. Calhoun was not about to have an attack on slavery and not about to have an attack on states' rights. So John C. Calhoun, who's this ardent states' rights supporter, sees this tariff of abomination pass, and he writes what is called the exposition. And he denounced the tariff as unjust and an unconstitutional attack on Southern way of life, and he was advocating for something that Thomas Jefferson first had advocated for back in the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, and then was brought back up with the Embargo Act at the Hartford Convention back during the embargo of France during the Jefferson administration, and that is going to be nullification. In the exposition, John C. Calhoun argues that South Carolina, because it is being attacked, has the right to nullify the tariff, and it should not be valid. This is going to lead to the nullification crisis, and this is in 1832. So Congress is going to try to diffuse the situation, because when you have the idea of nullification floated out there, that has the potential of dragging the entire country down. Remember, if states can choose which laws they can follow, that undermines the power of the Union. So Congress is going to try to step in. Congress is actually going to try to work out things, and they're going to pass a new tariff in 1832 that is a protectionist tariff. It still works to protect northern trade, but it's going to try to make the South a little bit happy. The nullies, or the people who are against the tariff in South Carolina, gained support of the South Carolina legislature in 1832, which means they came to power in South Carolina. And they voted to nullify the law. They voted to nullify the declarative, making it null and void. Now, the idea of nullification had been out there before. It had been out there since the 1790s. This is the first time that a state actually tried to nullify a law. People had talked about it before, but it had never happened. Now it is happening. South Carolina in 1832 votes to nullify the Treaty of 1832. And that is a direct attack on the power of the Constitution and the federal government. Now we have a constitutional crisis on our hands, and this is something that could tear the country apart. What ensues is known as the nullification crisis. Jackson was not a tariff supporter. He came out in support of it, but that was only political posturing. He does not want to see a tariff. But Jackson is not the type of guy you want to mess around with. We want to remember, this is the guy that killed a man in cold blood because he called his wife a name. He's not somebody you mess around with. So, even though that Jackson doesn't agree with the tariff, when South Carolina nullifies the tariff of abominations in 1832, Jackson sees this as an attack on the United States, and he basically puts his general's hat on. He moves the Army and Navy in position to South Carolina, and he threatened to invade South Carolina and to hang the nullifiers. Remember, we're talking about Andrew Jackson here. Henry Clay, being Henry Clay, is going to try to broker a compromise, and he's going to try to bring forward a tariff that would be a 10% reduction on the tariff of 1832. The compromise tariff is going to be passed in 1833, but we really have to understand Jackson's power here. Jackson goes to John C. Calhoun, his vice president, and he makes it known that you really want to go this route, we'll go after you. So compromise will happen, and that will step in. But Jackson really basically made it known that this kind of thing would not be tolerated. The Civil War could have happened in 1832, and Jackson was not about to let that happen. Something else that happens now, they do pass the compromise tariff, but they don't want to make it seem like the South had won. So with the compromise tariff bill in 1833, which is a much lower tariff, Congress also passes the Force Bill, which authorized the president to use the military to collect tariffs if states were declining to collect the tariffs. This was a big deal. Basically, this was asserting the power of the federal government, and they were not about to let a state hold it hostage. So let's go into the second battle of the Jackson administration, and that is the Bank of the United States. Now, the Bank of the United States was an appropriation by Congress, but it was a bill that was passed and it had a sunset clause, which means that it would only exist for a certain amount of time, and then Congress would have to vote on it again. Well, under the Jackson administration, the bank is coming back out. All right, the bank bill is coming back out. Now, Jackson is a Westerner, and being a Westerner, he does not like the bank. We have to remember back in the Panic of 1819, Westerners blamed the refusal of the Bank of the United States to guarantee the loans, the wildcat banks, is what caused the financial panic of 1819. A lot of farmers lost their homes. Now, the Bank of the United States said those banks were making bad loans that people would not have been able to pay, and they had to rein that in. Still, Jackson and most Westerners distrust the bank. It was something that was symbolic. The bank is a stabilizing force in the American economy. However, it was a privately held institution, and it was not seen as accountable to the people of the United States. Very much the same as the Federal Reserve today. The Federal Reserve, the chairman is appointed by the president, but the chairman serves for life. And the Federal Reserve Board is not beholden to the government. This is something that's been going on for a long time. There is a belief that the financial power, the overseeing of the financial power of the United States needs to be separate from politics. So you have a small group of investors who have a lot of money that are calling the shots, and Jackson, the man of the people, sees this as anti-democratic. So the bank is seen as going against the little guy. In 1832, Daniel Webster, who is a Massachusetts congressman, he is the third one. Clay, Webster, and Calhoun. These guys are going to be seen as the big advocates for the different plans in parts of the country. Clay is the westerner from Kentucky, Calhoun is the southerner from South Carolina, and Daniel Webster is the New Englander from Massachusetts. And those are going to be the three big congressmen who are going to be working out these deals. Clay and Webster proposed a renewal of the bank's charter. Clay was trying to gear this up and use it as an election issue to appeal to people in the North and kind of revive his American system, because he wants to run for president in 1832. Jackson is going to veto the bank bill, defying an earlier Supreme Court decision on this. And basically, he is going to imply that the president is going to be stronger than Congress and that he can stop this from happening. The veto is going to appall the Northerners, but the common people are going to love it. So basically, the end result of this is it's going to kill the Bank of the United States. Financially speaking, it's a bad move. And the country is going to see a lot of repercussions for it. There's going to be a lot of financial panics afterwards. But consequences aren't always seen right away. So when Jackson kills the bank, it's not like the economy is instantly going to crash. That's going to take a couple of years. But his actions will cause the economy to eventually crash. Now, Jackson's actions were seen as incredibly popular. He's sticking up for the common people. He's giving it to the man. You know, granted, later on we're all going to suffer, but right now people are loving it. If you're not seeing parallels to today, then you really got to think about this, because Jackson is a guy who appeals to the people and doing things that people want that may not be in the best interest of the country. And people are going to cheer for it, but in the long run they're going to suffer for it. We have a very similar situation in the president that we just elected. All right, so we really want to think about that. So election 1832 comes up, and we have Henry Clay putting his hat in, and he's challenging Andrew Jackson. There's also going to be an anti-Masonic party that kicks in there, and that's going to be the first time ever that we have a third-party candidate, and they don't really do much anything, but still, it's the first time ever we have a third-party candidate. Clay is running on a pro-money and nationalization agenda. He wants a bank, he wants internal improvements, all that. Jackson is running as the man of the people. Jackson is going to win by over 150,000 votes, which is quite a lot at that time, and he's going to kill it in the Electoral College 219 to 49. And when Jackson's elected, that's basically the death of the Bank of the United States. Jackson thought the election gave him a mandate to kill the bank. He removed all the federal deposits in 1833, and we lost the central bank. Basically, there were a lot of regional banks that take place, and those banks have very little oversight. They made really bad deals, and the government is going to lose lots of money, and the currency is going to become unstable, but that is going to be a headache for a future president. Mr. Jackson had delivered to the people, had given them what they wanted, and they'll suffer for it later. Let's go back. To what extent does Jackson deserve to be on the $20 bill? So we talked about a few things about Jackson. Spoil system, Bank of the United States nullification crisis. I want you to take that into account as you look at him. You can also take into account his personal life and his personal things. And then we'll deal with that tomorrow. So there you go, Andrew Jackson. Yay! Okay, everybody. This settles it for today. Have a wonderful day.